Alright, welcome back. So let's get away from the head for a little while and then let's work on the body so that we can, just get away from it, because you cannot lose your sensitivity of the head shape when you work on it for too long. Okay, to do that though, I want to separate the head model from the neck and work from the neck down for the body, because I don't really want it to, for example, when I'm doing data mesh or whatever to remesh the model, I want to keep the head intact. To do so, let me hold down Control and change the stroke of the mask to lasso. This will allow me to draw out a lasso shape. Okay, and mask the bottom, and then I can go for split. And then you have many ways to split it. You can see what they're doing, right? You can split the hidden ones, split to parts, split unmasked points, and masked points. So I'm going to go for split masked point. What this does is basically splitting the neck from the head. Now you can see the neck is now a separate model. Okay, a separate subtool. Alright, one more thing you want to turn on, or you may choose to turn on and off, or is this Sculptris Pro. If you turn that on, when you start sculpting, you can see it's going to dynamically change the underneath topology. Let's see that with wireframe. Holding down Shift and F, you can see the wireframe here. So if you start sculpting now, you can see the underneath topology is changing while you're sculpting. Okay, so that's one of the cool features ZBrush have. You can use this to quickly block out the geometry and without having to worry about topology at all. Okay, so let me Control Z, go back. Alright, so let's talk about the body parts and let's focus on torso. Okay, oftentimes in anatomy we generally use the length of the head as the measurement for the body. Okay, now from the head to the top of the torso, right, that's based on how long the neck is. And generally speaking, the neck can have different lenses, so there's no particular measurement, but more or less like a third of the head length is going to be the neck, and sometimes it can be much longer, sometimes it can be much shorter, things like that. So you don't have to like specify a particular proportion for that. The same actually goes to a lot of body parts, like longer arm, shorter arm, longer torso, longer legs. So there is a standard proportion, but I would encourage you to explore and find the proportion you designed. Okay. Generally speaking, the torso consists of three parts, two major masses: the ribcage and the hip. Right, that's the primary masses, and then you have the waist in the middle, right? And for the length of the ribcage is around 1.5 head length. Okay, and then the hip is going to be 1 head length. Okay, things like that. So we can go ahead and try to sculpt that out. One of the things you can use is move the head away somewhere here. Okay, and Shift S. This is going to create a snapshot of the head, and you can use that as the measurement. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use my Clay Build Up and start drawing out some volume on the bottom of the neck. Okay, you can see when you start drawing out, you can have some, the more you draw, the more volume you will have. So I'm trying to draw out the volume of the rib cage. As I stated earlier, it's like 1.5 units of the head length. So after a few sculpting, you get this big mass, and then you can go to here and compare. You can see now I'm trying to say, okay, that's 1.5 more or less of the length of the head, right, somewhere like that. Okay, now that's going to be the rib cage. Keep in mind that the rib cage is not like all the way down to here. It's the bottom edge of the rib cage. Rib cage is not symmetrical from the front to the back, and also it is not ending at the same point, right? You have all those smaller ribs, right? And they start and ends at different points. Okay, so this is the very bottom of the rib cage, but this is not supposed to be where everything should end. Anyway, let me just sculpt out the basic shape of the rib cage. Okay, it's like an oval shape more or less. Okay, Okay, so I'm trying to do that here on the back. You can think of it as two parts, two big volumes, and you have a valley in the middle. Okay. All right. And the length, the width of the ribcage from left to right is about somewhere around 1.2 unit of the head length. Okay. And that can vary too. So I'm not going to say that's going to be the rule for everyone, right? It's not the rule for everyone. It's basically the average. Okay. Now let me smooth out the neck and make the connection smoother. Okay. Here I'm trying to figure out this. This is where the clavicle is. So that's where the far back of the body. Okay, so you want to figure out where that is. Generally speaking, if you're standing still, this pretty much gonna be a straight line here on the back, but you can make it go back a little bit. Okay, just to enhance that part of the shape. Okay. All right, and the rib cage is more like this shape going forward, and here you have the bottom, the last rib cage, or we call that, I believe it's called the costal margin, right? Something like this. It's gonna go down, right? And now, for female character, those two lines, the costal margin is quite close to each other, right? And you have other ribs just following along around that area. Okay, I'm trying to figure out this contour here. Okay, now generally speaking, it's like tilted around 50-30 degree kind of thing, and based on the pose, it's gonna be different angles. Now sometimes it will be really useful if you can get like a model, like an actual model, a miniature of the human body, that you can just hold that in your hand and look around, because that's really helpful for you to understand. Sometimes look at 2D images as reference could be really difficult, because 2D image doesn't really give you that three-dimensional feeling of how everything looks like, especially from the bottom angle or top angle. It's really hard to see that on reference images. Okay. Anyway, so another feature of the rib cage or the torso basically is that it's wider on the back. It looks like this kind of like shape from the top view. Okay, and when it reaches to the waist, okay, it's going to be the thinnest part. And let me draw that out real quick, just some volume here, right? So that's the waist. The waist is quite symmetrical actually. When you reaches to the waist, the front and back are the most symmetrical part. Okay, so the widest part is in the middle. The front and back are smaller. That's also the part that this body shape looks. The section will looks more like a symmetrical, oval shape, but still the back have the valley in the middle. So you have this part digging in the middle. Okay, so that's gonna be the waist, and moving down to the clavicle, not clavicle, to the pelvis, right? That's going to be another big mass. Again, the length is around 1 unit of the head length. So I'm going to draw that out. Okay. All right. So this part of the body mass is more like a triangle from the front and back view. Okay. But one thing you wanted to pay attention to is how does it change from the front to the back. It's not quite symmetrical. What I was saying earlier is that the body is wider on the back, on the ribcage part, right? The top part of the body or the torso, the back is wider than the front, and gradually moving down to the waist, the back and the front and back are the same width. The middle part is the widest part. Moving down to here, you have the front wider than the back. Okay, so just remember that gradually changing proportion all the way going to the bottom. Okay, and also the width of the hip is almost the same as the width of the rib cage. Okay, so those two are similar, but for females you can make this one wider, but the actual wider part of the female character is actually on the leg. Okay, so some people think that's the widest part. That's actually not. Anyway, so many things. I think the best bet that you have, the best resource is going to be some real model in your hand, or a three-dimensional scan, 3D scan model there. That's better than 2D images as reference. Okay, so I have a model on my desk, and that's going to be my primary reference. And now from the set view, you want to tweak the contour of this model to create a proper standing pose. S shape is always what we plus the most. We think the S shape makes it look more natural looking and more organic. So we try to do that all the time. Okay. Or you can think of the torso tilting this way. Right. If I can change my stroke back to freehand, you can see the torso is tilting this way. The pelvis is tilting the other way. Okay. All right. So I'm going to use the edge polish and holding down Alt and create a plane here. And that's going to be where the leg grows out. And we want to mark that out as soon as possible. That helps me to figure out the surrounding structure because that's a really clean cut. And here at the back, let me push some of the structures in. Okay. Now the shape of the pelvis is quite organic, but you can summarize it into 3 big budgets on the top and basically a triangle shape, more or less. So those 3 big landmarks is something called aces in the front. Okay, and in the middle you call that iliac crest somewhere here. Okay, and then going back you have another budge called pieces. Okay, so aces, pieces, and iliac crest. Okay, those 3 landmarks. Sometimes you don't even have to remember their name. You know there are 3 things, their basic shape. No one is going to tell you. If you're working in a professional environment, your supervisor will never tell you like, hey, your pieces is wrong, right? No one is going to talk like that. What we're talking about is like, I think the torso should be bigger. I think, we're talking about bigger scales, right? No one really talks about like, this is wrong, right? That any smaller structure that's not relevant enough. Okay, but still it's helpful for you to learn those landmarks, and so that you know where they are. If you know there is something, right, you will be able to make it. If you don't know there is something, that you wouldn't. But generally speaking, or simplify the structure here, you'll be able to see, or what I'm doing here is you have a line like this going back, and there is a turning point going down, right? And here you have the bone for the tail, okay, over there in the middle. Okay, that's basically the back, what the back is. Okay. All right. We'll keep refining those parts later on, but what you should pay more attention to is this arc you're getting, right? Are you getting the arc nice and smoothly? Are you getting the proportion correct, right? Those things are going to be the thing you think the most, not, specifically where those things are. Sometimes they're different. Sometimes you have other things on top of them, so it's not like has to be very precisely defined in the beginning, but you can refine the shape all the way, all the time. All right. So with that being said, let's talk about some of the primary landmarks, right? So we have these landmarks. The first thing is where the clavicle is, okay, or we call that collar, bone, whatever you want to call it. This is just the name, so the important thing is remember where they are and where do they go. This is generally really visible, okay, no matter it's female or male character. It's more like a shape of a, I would say a bow. Okay, to go to different angles, also figure out like how that. Oftentimes this is not as flat as you think. Sometimes they're actually having a pretty steep transition here, more rounded than you think they are. Okay, just like the face, you don't want them to be flat, right? You want to give them arcs, curvatures, and that's the same thing I'm trying to do here, right? So figure out, I don't really want to bring that in that much, but figure out this arc from also the bottom view. Okay. And then you have this muscle here connected from the back of the ear to the top of the clavicle. It has a really long name. It's in Latin, and that's English is not my native language, so it's hard to pronounce that word. But yeah, it's a really long word. Has, I don't know, 15, 20 letters inside of it. It's called Sternocleidomastoid, whatever you want to call it. But you can call this Donald Trump or Obama. You know, that's just a name, right? So I don't think that's really that important. You remember where it is. You remember it's over there. And again, your supervisor will never tell you something is wrong here. We just don't use those names that much. But yeah, I think at least you know where it is, and that's the important thing. Okay, how does it change the shape down the way? You can see it's getting thinner here, it's getting thicker over here, and there are other smaller strands of muscle around it, but we can, you know, refine them later on. But for now, we don't really need to dip into that kind of detail. Anyway, so that's the clavicle, that's the muscle around it. And you can see it does go to the back and connect to the top of the shoulder, and it actually connected to the back of the, you can call that the, what do you call that, shoulder blade, right? That's normally what we call it, but you can also call it scapular, right? So that's gonna be on the back. So proportion wise, this guy is pretty much at, you know, the middle. So I mean, if you draw a line here in the middle and draw a line to the outside, those two lines, and you have the scapular in the middle, and it's not straight, it's tilted a little bit, right? So you can have that over here. Okay, and that's a important landmark, okay, where the clavicle is. And the clavicle have a high ground, and I believe it's called acromion process, and goes this way, and that's the connection here, connected to the clavicle right there, right? So you kind of want it to be able to at least you know that, but sometimes it's not that visible, right? Because it's covered by muscles on top of it. So I would say you have this big mass, and you have that connection. You know, kind of like just draw something over there to you know, just tell yourself that's where that is, because that marks the top of the rib cage, right? So you kind of just mark that out, and you can smooth that out eventually. Okay, all right. So that's an important landmark. So back is scapular, front is clavicle, and the costal margin, and then the three bodies I'm talking about, pieces, and you have the iliac crest here in the middle, right? And mind those bigger proportions. Okay, so this video is getting super long. I'm gonna stop it right here, and then moving on to the next, then we can maybe blocking a little bit more detail and talk about different muscle structures around it, and then we can move on to legs and arms. Okay, see you next time.